The silence before the voice, setting the stage for Revelation's speech picture. A world hushed under a purple-black sky, a moment when all earthly chatter falls silent and the heavens become a grand stage for something greater. The book of Revelation is not a collection of disconnected messages. It is a dramatic unveiling, a progressive revelation, a piercing view into a hidden reality that lies just beneath the surface of ordinary life. To appreciate the voice of God in Revelation, we first need to appreciate the silence that precedes it, the dramatic pause, the holding of breath that signals something momentous is about to break through. This silence is not a void of communication. It is a powerful form of communication in itself. It prepares the soul to listen. It clears away distractions. It focuses all senses on what matters most. Just as a thunderclap is more dramatic after a moment of utter stillness, God's voice resonates more profoundly when all human words are silenced. The Apostle John finds himself in this liminal space, a barren isle called Patmos, cut off from the bustling world, removed from the distractions of daily commerce and the pressures of empire. There, in a cave, in the Spirit on the Lord's day, something extraordinary happens. The heavens unveil their greatest speaker, not a distant deity, but the glorified Son of Man whose hair is white as wool, whose eyes are a flame of fire, and whose voice is like the roar of many waters. His voice is not a weak, faltering voice. It is a powerful, majestic voice that cuts through silence and chaos alike. The silence of Patmos was a necessary preparation for this voice. It forced the apostle to become a recipient, a listening soul, a man made ready to convey a message not just for his generation, but for all future generations. In the silence, God positions us to hear what we could not hear amid the clamor of the world. The first chapters of Revelation underscore this principle repeatedly. The 7 messages to the 7 churches all start with the affirmation, "He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says." It is a dramatic invitation to move from silence into revelation, from chaos into clarity. The Spirit speaks. The question is whether we will be silent enough to listen. Without this moment of calm, without this pause from earthly distractions, we would miss the majestic voice when it comes. So we must learn the discipline of silence, the ability to withdraw, to be alone with God, to let Him clear away the static of daily life. It is in this context that the greatest revelations come. The silence is not emptiness. It is a rich, pregnant pause, a moment filled with potential. It signals a transition from the earthly to the heavenly, from the visible to the invisible, from the temporal to the eternal. The silence on Patmos is a picture for all of us. If we want to hear the voice of God in Revelation, or in our own lives, we must first become still. We must allow God to silence our doubts, our worries, our distractions. We must create a space within ourselves for the majestic voice to break in. So this is where we begin, in silence, in reverence, in a posture of deep listening, ready to hear a voice that speaks eternal truths in a world filled with temporary noise. The voice begins to thunder, Revelation's first speech and meaning. As the silence deepens and the soul prepares itself, suddenly, a voice breaks through. A voice not weak or unsure, but thunderous, majestic, unmistakable. It is a voice that resonates through heavens and earth, a voice that cannot be ignored. Revelation 1:10-11 describes it in vivid detail. "I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a great voice as of a trumpet saying, 'I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last.'" Here we find the first dramatic speech of the book, a moment when the eternal God speaks directly to His servant, and through him, to all generations. The comparison to a trumpet is rich in symbolism. A trumpet is a tool of announcement, a clarion call that signals something momentous is about to unfold. It cuts through silence and confusion alike, and it summons, it rallies, it prepares people for a dramatic intervention. So when the Lord speaks with a voice like a trumpet, this is more than mere words. It is a divine alarm, a wake-up call for a world asleep in its routines and blinded by its worries. Alpha and Omega are the first and last letters of the Greek alphabet, a dramatic way of stating, I encompass all things from beginning to end. There is nothing outside my knowledge, my will, my dominion. He is not a deity who evolves, grows, or reacts. He is eternal, the Lord of history itself. Furthermore, by adding the first and the last, this highlights his role as origin and destination, the source from whom all comes and the goal toward whom all moves. All human stories, all earthly regimes, all ages and epochs are bracketed by his will. The first thunderous voice in Revelation is meant to instill awe, reverence, and confidence. To the persecuted church under Rome, this meant that their struggles were not chaos, but a purposeful thread woven by the Lord of all. To the isolated apostle stranded on Patmos, it meant that his Lord had not forgotten him. His future was safely in God's hands. The first voice of Revelation, then, is a kind of anchor. It fixes us in the eternal perspective that whatever we face, we do not face it alone or without purpose. The Lord who speaks first is the Lord who speaks last. His promises will come to pass because his word is sure. So when we hear this voice, we do more than tremble. We find refuge. The first speech of Revelation converts chaos into confidence, fear into faith, silence into song. It signals the start of a grand disclosure, a journey through judgments and promises that will unveil not the triumph of earthly powers, but the ultimate triumph of the eternal Lord. The voice has thundered. Now the heavens are opened. The stage is set for the greatest revelation mankind will ever witness. The voice unseals, mysteries breaking the seals of prophecy. As the thunderous voice of the Lord resonates through the heavens, it performs a dramatic and decisive action. It breaks the seals that kept God's future hidden from human view. The book of Revelation, particularly from chapters 5 and 6, shows us a dramatic scene in the throne room of heaven. There we find a scroll, sealed with 7 seals, a scroll that contains the future, the judgment, the renewal of all things. The apostle weeps because no one is found worthy to break the seals and unveil the hidden counsel of God. But then the voice speaks through a dramatic intervention. The Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, the Lamb who was slain, is worthy. His sacrifice, his suffering, his triumph over death, has earned him the right to unveil what no earthly king, angel, or power could. So when the Lamb takes the scroll, when he breaks the first seal, a cascade of events begins to unfold, not arbitrary chaos, but a purposeful revelation. Each subsequent seal opened under his direction brings into view a piece of God's plan, the rise and fall of earthly powers, wars and rumors of wars, famine and upheaval, the persecution of the faithful, and the ultimate triumph of God's kingdom. The voice we first heard in the opening chapters now guides us through the future itself, unlocking its hidden dimensions. The breaking of the seals is a dramatic affirmation of God's sovereign knowledge and control. It says to us, your future is not a chaos, it is a story. It has a purpose. It is in the hands of the Lord who overcame. Furthermore, this process underscores the role of suffering in the divine plan. The Lamb who was slain is the one who opens the future. His suffering is not a tragedy, but a key to understanding all subsequent events. So when wars come, when famine strikes, when injustice reigns for a time, we can remember. These were not a surprise to God. They were opened by the Lord who triumphed through suffering and promises eventual renewal. The 7 seals, then, unveil not a future gone awry, but a future under the purposeful direction of God's will. The voice that speaks through these judgments is not a voice of chaos, but of control, not of alarm, but of a deep, eternal plan. And for the people of God, this means hope, that the upheavals we see and experience are not the last word. There is a hidden thread tying all these events toward a grand conclusion, a renewal of all things. The Lord who opened the first seal will surely see it through to the last. His voice guides, interprets, and guarantees the future. So we move forward not in fear, but in faith, not in confusion, but in confidence. For we know the voice that speaks, and we know his promises will surely come to pass. The voice judges and purifies. the day of the Lord unveiled. As the seven seals are opened and the future progressively unfolds, the voice of God in Revelation grows in power and urgency, shifting from revelation to judgment, from disclosure to intervention. The heavens tremble, the earth quakes, and the powers that seemed permanent tremble under the weight of His word. The Bible speaks repeatedly of the day of the Lord, a moment when God decisively intervenes in human history, putting an end to injustice, deception, and the reign of earthly powers. The voice that previously opened the future now executes its judgments, purifying a world gone mad under its own sin. The seven trumpets follow the seals, and the seven bowls follow the trumpets, each a dramatic manifestation of God's wrath against a world that has turned away from its Maker. But this wrath is not arbitrary. It is purposeful, a purifying force meant to clear away what is corrupt in order to make all things new. The judgments in Revelation reflect a deep biblical pattern. First the warning, then the trial. First the opportunity for repentance, then the decisive intervention when people harden their hearts. The voice of God in these judgments is a voice of justice, a voice that confronts oppressive regimes, dismantles powers founded on deception and violence, and vindicates the persecuted and the weak. The dramatic scenes, the falling of stars, the darkening of the sun, the turning of rivers to blood, should not be read simply as literal disasters, but as powerful symbols. They portray a world order collapsing under the pressure of divine intervention. The heavens and earth were meant to reflect God's peace and order, but human rebellion filled them with chaos and injustice. So the Lord speaks to dismantle this flawed order in preparation for a new heavens and a new earth. His judgments are not the final word, but a means to renewal. The voice we hear through these judgments is the voice of a holy God who cannot allow injustice to reign forever. His judgments are, paradoxically, a form of mercy. By tearing down what is false, He prepares the way for what is true. The day of the Lord, then, is not a day of pure destruction, but a day of transformation. It signals the end of a fallen age and the birth of a renewal, a recreation. The Lord speaks, and all that is opposed to His will falls. But in the ashes, something new emerges, a world made right, a people made whole. So we, who put our trust in Him, do not fear His judgments. We realize that through them God is making all things new. His voice, which thundered through the heavens and opened the future, now purifies the present and prepares us for eternal peace. The voice declares renewal, a new heaven and a new earth. As the judgments come to their dramatic conclusion and the heavens and the earth pass away under the purifying power of God's voice, something extraordinary occurs, a renewal, a rebirth. The voice that first thundered from the heavens, opened the future, and pronounced judgment now speaks a final majestic word. Behold, I make all things new. Revelation 21 reveals a dramatic transformation. The first heavens and the first earth pass away. The sea is no more, and a new heavens and a new earth come into view. The holy city, the New Jerusalem, descends from God like a bride adorned for her husband. The voice from the throne declares, "The tabernacle of God is with men. He will dwell with them, and they will be His people, and God Himself will be with them." Here we find the fulfillment of all promises, the true purpose of all that has gone before. The judgments were not an end in themselves. They were a means to clear away the chaos and injustice to make room for renewal. The renewal is not a simple return to Eden. It is a greater, more majestic future. The marriage of heaven and earth, the perfect unity of God and His people, is the ultimate fulfillment of the biblical story. The voice of God here speaks peace, restoration, and eternal fellowship. Death is abolished. Pain, crying, and suffering are gone. The former things have passed away. The renewal is total. Nothing is left outside the reach of God's redeeming power. The voice declares this with absolute confidence and finality. It is done. The plans made in eternity past, revealed through prophets and judgments, have come to their perfect fulfillment. All this underscores a profound biblical view, that God's judgments serve His renewal, His discipline paves the way for peace. His thunder leads to a new song. The renewal is not a distant, abstract hope. It is a future made certain by the Word of God. His voice guarantees it. So for us, this means we can live with hope and confidence regardless of the chaos we see in the world today. The renewal of all things is not a mere wish. It is a divine promise, a future already secured by the death and resurrection of the Lamb. The voice has the final word, a word of life, peace, and eternal fellowship with God.